Namaste. We see all around hundreds of citizens in society ruining their health and wealth due to addictions of various types. Even when even when they wish to come out of it, they find it hard to do so despite such a huge price they have to pay. A large percentage of those who seek professional help in the mental health field suffer from substance related and addictive disorders. The addictions can range from coffee to very strong drugs. Today we'll discuss substance-related and addictive disorders with psychoanalysis consultant Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Himanshu ji, uh, can we start with what is addiction? And is addiction only of substances?
Yes, it's a good point to start the discussion. Addiction means unnatural, intense dependence on anything. The failure of which to not the failure of not satisfying the desire, it then results in intense distress. So we are looking at an unnatural dependence on something, the non-availability of which, the dissatisfaction related to which, can result in intense distress and impairment, often also financial or other losses, and losses to the death. This kind of an unnatural dependence is what we call addiction. This addiction also shows a law of diminishing returns, that you have to increasingly consume a larger quantity to get the same benefit out of the substance. So this is broadly what is addiction. Addiction need not necessarily be only of substances, although substance addiction is the most common of all addictions. Addiction can be of substance like alcohol or tobacco or cocaine or hypnotic drugs or hallucinogenic substances or hypnotic drugs or opioids or cannabis or any other substance. Similarly, there can be non-substance related addictions like gambling, like movie watching, like addiction of sexuality, like addiction of going to a particular place at a particular time, like addiction of going to a kitty party. So everyone going to a kitty party will not have an addiction, but some will. So you can have, some people will have addiction of seeking thrill, doing something risky and exciting activities. So it's a risk addiction. So addiction is an unnatural dependence on a substance or an activity or a situation or an event or a place, and this unnatural dependence is very intense, and failure to satisfy the related desire causes intense distress and impairment to the person. And addiction can be both substance related and non-substance related.
Now, can you just tell us what is this chapter on substance-related and addictive disorders all about?
This chapter deals with the clinical problems seen in the area of mental health related to addiction. And this chapter goes into addictions of two types, substance-related addictions and non-substance-related addiction. In the non-substance-related addiction, only one element is present at present, which is included at present, which is gambling. Whereas in substance-related addictions, we have different substances like cannabis, opioids, hypnotic drugs, tobacco, caffeine, alcohol, the stimulant drugs, the sedative drugs, the uppers and the downers. And all these substance-related addictions are classified into uh, two different groups: the substance use-related problems and substance-induced problems. And the substance-induced problems related to again two parts: the substance intoxication problems and the substance withdrawal problems. So broadly, we are looking at three elements of difficulties. One, this addictive craving for something, and the difficulty if the craving is not satisfied. That is one set of difficulties. The second set of difficulties is the difficulties when you get yourself intoxicated with that substance. And the third set of difficulties is when you try to get out and the withdrawal symptoms start coming. So the whole chapter divides into these four categories of problems: the substance use problems, the substance intoxication problems, the substance withdrawal problems, and non-substance related addictions. These four categories the whole chapter is divided into, and it goes into details of each. For example, every substance that you use for addiction will produce a different sort of feeling in you, a different sort of pleasure or pain in you, and it will have a different set of biological characteristics which come up as problems. So if you intoxicate yourself with caffeine, you will have a different sort of psychological and biological problems. And if you intoxicate yourself with cocaine, you will have a different set of characteristics displayed by the body and mind. So this chapter goes into details of the major intoxicants which are used, the major substances which are used, and goes into these areas of what happens when substance X is somebody's craving for it and not available. What happens when the X is intoxicated, one is intoxicating oneself with X, and what happens when one tries to get out of X with withdrawal symptoms. So this is how the chapter is. I believe in subsequent editions with more research, we should see even more non-substance related addictions getting added to the chapter, especially addictions related to sex addiction, thrill addiction, risk addiction, addiction related to movies, addiction related to screen, like the new generation we see are constantly into screens, addiction related to gaming, people spend so much of time only in gaming, addiction related to going to a particular place at a time every day, without which the person is not at peace, addiction related to being in spiritual groups, at times even at a great personal cost to oneself. So I think this whole ambit of addiction and the definition of addiction will get more liberal and more encompassing and wider in times to come as we go on to DSM-6, DSM-7 and so on. Because we see in society far more addictions than are described in DSM-5.
Now my next question is substance addiction purely biological, or is there a psychological aspect to it also?
In all addictions, we see three aspects. There is the pleasure aspect, that every addiction leads to increase in pleasure or reduction in pain or both. So there is one pleasure aspect. Second, there is an aspect of biochemical dependence, that once the addictive substance has got into the body, the addictive substance, the way it reacts with the body, creates a sort of biochemical dependence upon the substance. And more the biochemical dependence, we usually say the more dangerous the addiction is. And the third aspect is the psychological aspect, that why is the person doing this addiction? What are the psychological needs he is satisfying? Or what are the psychological dangers he is able to run away from by this addiction? So the three aspects will be there to every addiction: the aspect of pleasure, the aspect of biochemical dependence, and the aspect of psychological needing. Now these three will vary in proportion based upon which addiction we are talking about. If we are talking of substance-related addiction, the biochemical dependence aspect will be much stronger. But if we are talking about activity-related addiction, the biochemical component will be very weak. In activity-related addiction, the pleasure aspect also at times can be very weak. The psychological needing aspect will be much heavier. So how much proportion is each of the three aspects important in a given addiction depends upon which addiction we are talking about, substance or non-substance, and within substance also, substance by substance, chemical by chemical, the proportion of the three will be changing. And if the proportion of biochemical dependence is strong, then it requires a psychiatry heavy treatment. But if the proportion of psychological aspect of addiction is stronger, then it has to be psychotherapy in the forefront, supported by psychiatric medication. So it depends upon which addiction we are talking about. All the three are involved, and based upon what is the intensity of each, the healing plan will have to be worked out.
Now, when we are talking about two types of addictions, one is substance addictions and the other are non-substance or activity addictions. Can you differentiate here in the other aspect, which is non-substance or activity addiction? Is there a difference between compulsive behaviors and addiction?
It's a good question, because addictions can look from a distance very near to compulsions. But we have to differentiate between them with certain milestones in our mind, certain differentiating criteria in our mind. First, usually compulsions have an associated obsession. Some including thought the person is not able to control, despite his will it keeps coming up. So this obsessive thought is not present in case of addictions, number one. Number two, the law of diminishing returns applies in case of addictions, which we don't see in OC cases. Number three, the element of anxiety and guilt is often primary from psychoanalytic point of view in case of OC, but in case of addiction, we see many other factors at play. It is not only anxiety and guilt, there are many other reasons why this happens. Number four, if we look at the genesis and onset, then OC genesis and onset has a very strong inside component. Whereas in case of addictions, many times it will start just by the power of the need for social acceptance. It will start often by an innocent habit becoming an addiction. It can start as innocent social drinking and then move on to addiction. It can start as just giving company to somebody who is gambling and then going into addiction. So this onset also is very different for addiction and for OC. And therefore we see there is a difference between the two. And we can also see the same in terms of medication. That the medication for the two also has uniqueness of their own in the way they act upon the person. So all these things help us to differentiate. And more specifically, I think the onset is very important. Right? The pleasure involved in action is very important, which is not so much in OC. But in addiction, there is a very strong pleasure element involved. Third, in many cases of addiction, it has to depend upon, or it depends upon rather, certain events. It is not an autonomous thing on its own. Whereas in OC, we don't see that kind of dependence. For example, if somebody has performance anxiety and because of that is consuming too much of tea or coffee, to overcome that anxiety the entire day out, if he goes on a vacation, it will fall drastically. That kind of drastic fall we will not see in the OC manifestation. So I think these criteria of onset, criteria of pleasure, criteria of including thoughts, criteria of privacy of guilt and anxiety, criteria of sudden reduction when the stressor is removed from the outside world. All this help us to, the law of diminishing returns and the medicines which work. All of them help us to demarcate between the two, the OC spectrum difficulties and the addiction spectrum difficulties.
Okay. So now we go to the causation part of this addiction. How does psychoanalysis explain the causation of substance addiction and activity addiction?
This brings us to this whole world of addictions. It's a very large world with very different kind of citizens inhabiting that world. So, if we get into the question of why people take to addictions, we will have a list of causes. And this list is how psychoanalysis explains various types of addictions. So, there is no one particular cause of addiction, it is a whole set of causes, and different people, different causes will be at work. Let us look at some of them. First one, the addiction may be just because of pleasure. Then there is a pleasure addiction. One may be consuming alcohol or one may be consuming tobacco or something. Now that psychoanalysis just says is need for excessive pleasure because of some fixation in the earlier stage. So in early childhood, either there was deprivation or too much of it, causing the fixation and therefore this addiction to pleasure. Another person may be indulging in addiction because of oral deficits. There is some oral fixation in the oral phase of one's development, and therefore one is taking alcohol or any other liquid or tobacco kind of addiction substance. So that may be the second reason, the oral deficit and the fixation in the oral stage. That may be the second reason. Third, there may be a case of a weak ego disintegrating in the face of challenge. And because of that, anxiety is generated, disintegration anxiety comes about, fragmentation anxiety comes about, and to overcome it, one indulges in an act of pleasure which temporarily produces this sort of consolidation. So the self is fragmenting, disintegrating. And in that state of disintegrating anxiety, one wants a consolidation. And the pleasure movement, which causes the contraction of nerves, is a consolidating movement against that fragmentation. So some one group may be indulging in addiction in order to overcome the disintegrating fragmenting anxiety. Fourth, another group may overcome performance anxiety and the feeling of inferiority by consuming some substance before a performance challenge is entered into. So just before he has to do something, he will have a cup of tea. Just before he has to go on stage, he will have a cigarette. So that group will be overcoming their inferiority by using the substance, and the substance is like ingesting a good breast, a good reliable stable object, which is a counterpoint to one's inferiority. Then we will have people who want aliveness, and they seek this aliveness by a high or by risk-taking excitement. And this is a defense against deadness inside. The internalization of a dead mother, the internalization of the deadness of the dead breast or the dead mother is terrifying. And that deadness is escaped from by using substances which produce excitation. Another group will get into addiction because of social acceptance. Like it is a classic case of a teenager who wants to be accepted by a group of adults, and to do that, he copies the behavior of the adult, and that often involves addictions, substances. So it may just be out of social acceptance, then what they take to substance addiction, and substance use, and then it becomes addiction. It may also be to be away from a particular place, and we may be looking at the psychological phenomena of torture and reverie. That the person feels either he is in reverie where he has to do nothing, and whenever he has to do something in the world, it appears like torture. So he gets exhausted very soon because of that whole feeling of unbearable challenge and torture. And the moment he has worked for 2 or 3 hours, then he has to go to the state of reverie to refresh himself. And that need to go into the state of reverie might be accomplished using certain substances. That the substance somehow helps the person get into the state of reverie. This getting into the state of reverie can also be achieved by going to certain places, maybe religious, maybe spiritual, maybe social, or it may just be a walking, jogging path. That every evening a person goes to that place, and the moment he enters that place, suddenly a calm and peace descends upon him. And he cannot not go to that place. He has to go to that place. So this is not counted as addiction as yet in BSL, but we see in real life this is nothing less than addiction. So this switch state becomes a state of addiction. And one has to go into that state every day, either at home or outside. And some people may go into addiction, like for example in gambling, in order to regain the lost good rest, in order to satisfy the greed to grab everything good that is out there in the world. It may be an inner compulsion to get everything and hold everything. So this is, and some people they do it in order to have spiritual experiences or rare experiences of the mind, and they want to explore the whole range of consciousness. So in Eastern tradition, many of the substances which we talk about as addictive substances were used for spiritual purposes, under control, under supervision, of course. So psychoanalytically, these are almost 12 to psychoanalytically, there are almost 12 to 15 different explanations of why people take to addiction, and which explanation applies depends upon the specific substance or the specific activity of addiction that we are referring to. And obviously, behind every cause, for example, if we say somebody has smoking addiction because he is trying to manage his anxiety. So the first level of psychoanalytic explanation will be, it is the anxiety which is being managed by smoking. He is escaping anxiety by smoking. The next question will be, why is the anxiety coming about? And there we will have a Freudian explanation, a Kleinian explanation, a Kohutian explanation, an ISTD explanation, a Winnicottian explanation, and so on. And case by case, something will be right and something will not apply. So this is how psychoanalysis views, explains addiction in terms of the generic process and in terms of phenomenology belonging to any particular school of psychoanalysis.
Okay, so what is the healing approach in psychoanalysis for these various kinds of addictions?
The healing approach takes two different paths. For fragile patients, it has to be long cohesion holding, followed by the interpretative process of Freudian, Kleinian, ISTDP, or even cohesion nature. And for strong ego candidates, it will be interpretative process we can start off directly and use Freudian, Kleinian, ISTDP, or Winnicottian schools in order to take forward the interpretative process. The first part, of course, is we make sure that the addiction is ego distorted. And if it is not, it has to be made so. And the person has to realize the cost benefit analysis of what he is doing. Second, in terms of duration, we look at the mild cases where we are looking at twice a week, 6 months, to moderate to severe cases, twice a week, 2 years. And this has to be accompanied naturally by psychiatric medication if the biological component is strong and the withdrawal symptoms are difficult. And it can also be accompanied by certain CBT techniques and tools of gradual giving up, the gradual tapering off of the whole process and differing from the impulse to consume something. So tools from CBT for gradual tapering off and deferment of impulse also are very important, along with the psychoanalytic aspect where we go into the depth of why the person is taking into addiction. And the most common element that we will find is lack of good, reliable, stable object internalized by the person. The person does not have a good, reliable, stable object inside, and therefore there is no soothing element inside, there is no stabilizing element inside, there is no reassuring element inside, and therefore anxiety is generated because of internal and external processes. They become very difficult to manage. Loneliness also is a very important element in this. A person not connected to a few people and is very lonely finds it very difficult to manage anxieties and easily can get into addiction to take care of that loneliness, that unbearable loneliness and anxiety. And this is how psychoanalysis would look at it, that looking at the anxiety, looking at the deadness, whether it is situated in the childhood phenomena or has just built up bit by bit, or there is an event in childhood. These are the classical vantage points psychoanalysis would like to look at using all the schools of psychoanalysis. And the process is the same as usual. Revisit the incident which started it off, make the unconscious cognitive part conscious, and break up the feelings, feel the feelings fully, and release them in catharsis. And after this, the behavioral component can follow of practice, of getting out of addiction and making, creating a new normal, or rather re-entering the normal which was existing before the addiction set in.
What will be the role of groups in curing addiction in the psychoanalytical way?
Group therapy and group support both are very important here. If, not only if, I think there are, there is no if, actually there are many people in developing countries like India, Africa, and many other developing parts of the world where you have large group of people suffering from addiction who want to come out of addiction but may not be able to afford individual therapy. And therefore, group therapy becomes almost a must, a social necessity in this situation. So group therapy for de-addiction has to be something which has to be well researched and innovated in. Unfortunately, we have not used the group therapy tool enough in this area. We need to. Second, even if group therapy is not practiced, support groups are very important. Like we always hear of Alcoholic Anonymous. Similarly, there are groups for other addictions also. And there are groups for other support also in other psychological sicknesses like depression support group, or anxiety support group, or OC support group, and so on. So a de-addiction support group is a very good group, a very good tool to provide support to people who want to come out of it. And we can have all kinds of combinations. We can have individual therapy, and the person also can be a part of a support group, or we can have a person in group therapy and also simultaneously a part of a group or support group. And all of this individual therapy support, group support can always be complemented by additional holistic healing measures.
Okay, now these days the word holistic healing is making rounds. So, is there a way of holistic healing approach which can help in this kind of addiction issue?
Yes, in fact, in practice, we see the holistic healing tools working very well. And unofficially, people who are into the de-addiction process, they often make use of these holistic healing tools, at times even outside of the knowledge of the official healer. And this refers to some tools like, one, homeopathy is very useful to people in the process. Two, we look at Reiki, pranic healing, the energy healing tools, which provide relaxation, which provide feeling fresh, which provide feeling stable, consolidated. We have tools like pranayama and yoga, which have shown to be helping people in the process of de-addiction. We have tools like visualization, meditation, getting into spiritual groups which are supportive, not the ones which are self-righteous and condemning groups, but there are many groups which are supportive. Such supportive spiritual groups have helped many people come out of that addiction cycle, and they now vouch that these spiritual supportive groups were very useful to them when they were fighting the difficulties of getting out of addiction. So holistic healing definitely has a role to play, which may be in addition to the mainstream therapy.
What is the role of patient education in this context in helping the healing process?
Patient education is very important because the patient has to realize that it is not just a habit, it is not just a repeated seeking of pleasure. What he is fighting is deeply rooted in him. And he has to understand the seriousness of it. That it is not something that can just be willed away. He cannot just will that it should go away and it will go away. So he has to work upon it. And this working involves a primary understanding of what is happening to him. And this helps him first to know what is happening so he has right assessment of the depth and the seriousness of what is at work. Two, he has a clear set of do's and don'ts. What aggravates the problem and what heals the problem. So he can correspondingly act to keep away the aggravators and go closer to the healers, whatever those techniques are. Third, he is able to know which medication, which therapy approach is working or not working. If he is well educated, so he can go report back to the healer and correspondingly the right course can be taken or modified. Fourth, he can report very precisely what the healer or healers are looking for if he knows about his problem. So in what he reports, he becomes more to the point, accurate, and more meaningful for the healer, whoever the healer is. And lastly, with scientific knowledge, he is able to create a good, scientifically informed set of holistic tools as well as social support systems to aid him in coming out of this problem, which is trying to desperately fight it out.
Okay, so as we are talking about his social support system, obviously the role of his family or caregivers comes into play. So what is the importance of education of those people also in this whole healing process?
It's very important for caregivers not to light fires which can aggravate the situation of the patient. And this is true of all sicknesses, including addiction. That parents should not do, the caregiver should not do something which aggravates the problem. Especially if the person is doing addiction in order to take revenge from parents. And any sort of bouncing upon the patient, condemning him, being self-righteous, this only aggravates the issue. This moral sermonizing only aggravates it even more, does not actually help it. So the parents should know clearly the cause of it. This will allow them to have a clear list of do's and don'ts. This will allow them to come out of this self-righteous sermonizing and condemnation of the patient. This will help them to clearly see efficacy of medication and therapy approaches and report accordingly. This will help them to get good supporting systems, social support groups, holistic healing tools, recourse to holistic healers. And lastly, it will help them avoid secondary problems of their own. That in the long-term helping caregiving of the patient, the caregiver should not develop secondary problems of secondary depression, secondary anxiety, secondary irritation, and so on. And that is very, very important, that all this can be taken care of and the healing of the patient can be greatly accelerated and made very smooth by providing adequate caregiver education.
Okay, Himanshuji, today I think we have covered the chapter pretty well. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And now in the subsequent videos, we'll be covering other chapters in the same way. So do watch our coming videos and write to us. Namaste.